morning. Welcome to the March 22nd, 2024 meeting of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. A link to view this meeting has been provided on the Commission's website. Hayden, please take a roll call of the commissioners.
Commissioners Carter. Present. Griscom. Here. Levine.
Here.
Patterson.
Here.
Eddie Smith. Here. Lauren Smith. Here. Tudor.
Here.
Woodson. Here. Chair Richards.
Here.
Madam Chair, there are 9 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Before we begin, are there any opening comments from any commissioners? Seeing none, today the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission will hear reports from committees that met yesterday, followed by several presentations from staff, and finally an amended charter agreement. First, we will begin with any in-person public comment. Then we will move into reports from committees. First, Business Operations will provide us with some budget updates from Director of Finance Melanie Harrell, as well as some contract approvals that require a vote. We will then hear one policy update from the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee presented by General Counsel Ashley Thomas. Then, from the School Performance and Accountability Committee, Director of Authorizing Beth Figueroa will provide some updates on the 22-23 annual report, the 23-24 school year, our LEA results-based monitoring, and finally an amendment petition from Bluff City High School. We will then move on to presentations from staff. Ashley Thomas will be presenting on open meetings, open records, and conflicts of interest. Beth Figueroa will then give us a refresher on the New Start appeal process. Director of External Affairs, Hayden Pendergrass, will then present a legislative update. Executive Director Tess Stovall will then present her updates. Following that, Ashley Thomas will present a charter agreement from Rocket Ship Nashville Northeast Elementary. Finally, Manager of Strategic Initiatives, Drejene Cummings, will update us on the strategic plan and lead us in a discussion around the Commission's visioning work. Are there any questions or comments regarding our agenda? Thank you. Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it and the agenda is approved. The minutes of the meeting held on January 26, 2024 and February 26, 2024 have been provided. Does anyone have any edits or comments to make about those minutes before we proceed?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Say no. All right. The ayes have it and the minutes are approved. All right. In accordance with Commission Policy 1.200, we have reserved time for up to 30 minutes of public comment. Hayden, can you please let us know how many written comments were submitted and introduce any individuals who have registered for public comment?
Madam Chair, we did not have any written comments submitted, nor did we have any requests to speak.
Thank you, Hayden. I'm going to come down here so I stay where I can be heard, but I want to take just a minute for some comments, and if Drejene and Tess would come down here with me. We have one matter we need to undertake this morning, and it's to recognize Tom Griscom for his work as our chairman from our initial time. And Tom, we'd like you to come down too. Nope. Sorry. We all remember where we started this journey, and you were the one who was our leader and named the first chair. And I think all of us enjoy challenges, but you got more than what you signed up for. And if someone had told us at our first meeting that we would immediately go into hiatus and we couldn't meet in person again for 2 years, none of us would have believed it. But you handled all of our work that needed to be done with grace and confidence and kindness, and we appreciate it. So the staff has done some work. We have a resolution from the House of Representatives we'd like to present to you. It recognizes all of your work, your chairmanship, your service to the state of Tennessee and to this commission, and we are very grateful. Thank you. You're welcome. Mark?
Done that before.
Surprised him about it. It's nice to get to have some fun at the beginning of a meeting. I do want to note for everyone, Tom has graciously agreed to remain a commissioner and was reapproved. So I personally, and I know everyone's really grateful. So even though he's not chair anymore, we are appreciative of his service and insight.
Can I make one comment? So when you all are in Chattanooga and you see my wife, please tell her that you really appreciate the fact that she's allowed me to continue serving on this commission. It will help a lot.
Only if in fact we can get $5.
I'll let you see a great view of Chattanooga from where we live.
Okay. Go back onto the prepared plan. We will now hear a report from our Business Operations Committee. I would like to recognize Commissioner Mike Carter to introduce these items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the Business Operations Committee, the committee heard updates on the fiscal year 24 budget to actuals, fiscal year 25 budget, and grants. We also were presented with 3 contracts for approval by Executive Director Tess Stovall. I would like to recognize Melanie for these updates. Not sure, Melanie?
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
I made it up here. It was very, very difficult to follow Tom, but that's how I was able to sneak up without anybody seeing me. Thank you so much, Chair Carter. We provided an update yesterday on the FY24 budget to actuals. I think our reflection is that we're continuing to come in under budget. We're comfortable about our spending. We have seen some slight decreases in our revenue, primarily because of a decrease in the per pupil rates for Davidson County and Shelby County. These are not particularly material amounts. We're pretty easily able to offset them with decreases in our expenses, but we are continuing to monitor that as we know that there are conversations about declining sales tax revenue and other tax sources across the state. The commission also provided an FY25 draft budget update. I want to emphasize we're not bringing anything for approval. This is just a status update of where we think we may be in our amended budget in July. Obviously, legislative session is still ongoing. There are pieces of the budget to still be determined, but this is an update on what we're seeing. As I noted, since we are hearing and seeing some indications of declining sales tax revenue, which would have an impact on our authorizer fee, we're monitoring those closely and including very conservative revenue estimates that assume sort of no increase in any level of per pupil funding. So we'll be monitoring that again and have been very fortunate to have great partners at our districts that are sort of even informally keeping us informed about how their revenue is coming in, which has been very helpful for us. We did have our position request for an English language learners coordinator included in the governor's proposed budget. Obviously, we will not know if that is ultimately approved by the General Assembly, but we are encouraged, and I know Nate and Katie will be very grateful if we will be able to hire that position for next year. We will be bringing a formal amended budget in FY25 once legislative session, or I'm sorry, in July for FY25 after legislative session concludes at our next meeting. I did also provide a grants update specifically around the grants that we currently have. It's just under $10 million. We currently pass through 100% of our grant funds to our schools. We've implemented some contingency plans to account for delays in our Title I, Title II, III, IV, and IDA allocations. We're still waiting on sort of the final numbers for those, but we've implemented contingency plans based on our initial budgets and initial allocation levels and are working closely with the department on that. We also provided a TISA update, again, outlining some of these changes to state revenue. There's an increase to the base TISA rate in the proposed budget, currently under consideration by the legislature. And we also provided an update on some updates that we anticipate we will implement to our federal funding procedures for next year. This is just to incorporate changing demographics in the district. As we grow and become scalable, there's a little bit more heterogeneity across our schools, and so this allows us to capture that more effectively. Finally, I know Tess presented as part of her updates our request for approval on 3 contracts for FY25. The first of these, Tennessee Language Center, has a maximum liability of $40,000. This is a contract that we've had in years past. It allows us to make sure that we can get our policies and procedures translated. We have options to use them for translation and interpreting services. And so it's been a very valuable interagency agreement for the commission that we're requesting approval to continue to use. We also are requesting to renew our contract with Kelly Croneman with a maximum liability for FY25 of $35,000. Kelly currently is a contractor that supports our special populations team, our finance team is able to support a lot of our federal programs work in particular. Finally, we're also asking for approval around our Power School contract. This contract is unique in that we are actually included as part of the TDOE's contract as a state entity. So there are pieces of that contract about the max liability that haven't been finalized yet, given that we're approaching the end of the fiscal year. But we have seen our costs as our district enrollment has go up for that contract. And so we're asking for approval to continue to implement that service up to a maximum liability of $65,000. We think that should be a comfortable amount for that contract for next year. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the contracts with Tennessee Language Center, Kelly Croneman, and Power School? So moved. Second. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the contracts are approved. Thank you very much. Our next agenda item is the report of the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee. I would like to recognize Vice Chair Chris Tudor for this item.
Thank you, Chairman. The Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee had a discussion of LEA Policy 6207 for final reading. I would like to recognize General Counsel Ashley Thomas to present this item.
Thank you, Commissioner Tudor. During yesterday's Rule Policy and Governance Committee meeting, we discussed on final reading LEA Policy 6207, dealing with out-of-district enrollment. Between first and final reading, we removed some duplicative terms that were named for the MOU. We added clarifying language that was flagged by Chair Richards. And we've also developed supporting documents that would drive the practical operation of any school that chooses to use out-of-district enrollment. That is all for that policy. The only other update is that the staff is beginning their internal audit, and so we probably will have a lot more policies for you all come July. But I'll turn it back over to Commissioner Tudor.
Do any of the commissioners or Commissioner Tudor included, do you have questions for Ashley? If not, do we have a motion to approve LEA Policy 6207 on final reading?
So moved.
Do we have a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, say nay. The ayes have it, and the policy is approved on final reading. The next item on our agenda today is the report from the School Performance and Accountability Committee. Commissioner Patterson, I'd like to recognize you to provide the report from the committee's meeting.
Thank you, Chair Richards. The School Performance and Accountability Committee heard updates on the 22-23 school year, the 22-23 annual report, the 23-24 school year. our LEA results-based and our LEA results-based monitoring. I'd like to recognize Beth Figueroa to present these items.
Thank you. At yesterday's School Performance and Accountability Committee meeting, we discussed a lot of different items, but we specifically looked at the 22-23 annual report, and that was presented. This report is produced annually, and it reflects all of our schools' academic, operational, and financial performance for the prior school year. Overall, the performance was generally strong. We saw lots of meet standard, and we will continue to work with schools that had instances where they may have fallen below meeting the standard. The committee also heard updates related to the 23-24 school year, and this included a presentation of KIPP Antioch College Prep Middle's interim review, which indicates that the school is on track for renewal in 5 years. Site visits were also discussed, and we concluded that all site visits, we overall saw positives and strengths within our buildings, including that data is being used, and we have data-driven schools. Facilities and safety walkthroughs were positive, and our schools are utilizing positive behavior intervention systems. This is a specific area that we're looking at very closely in the coming years with scaling, and so we have a survey going out to our schools in the coming weeks so that way we can garner feedback and efficiently and effectively scale without sacrificing our overall process. Additionally, I will say that as we went through our site visits, we did see some noted trends related to chronic absenteeism and staffing, and we are going to be working with our schools as they continue to face these ongoing challenges. Pre-opening updates were also provided related to 6 schools that are going through this pre-opening process. This is a very rigorous process because it's important that our schools open successfully. And at this point, the majority of our schools are on track for opening this fall, and the few that are still working through some facility items will have those updates at the next commission meeting. Next, staff provided updates related to Bluff City's probationary status, TCAP, and 3rd grade retake. Updates were also provided related to some TDOE IEP monitoring and some larger changes that are taking place surrounding services to English learners. And the student programs and support team is actively working with our schools to implement those items. And then lastly, the LEA results-based monitoring was discussed. And while there were some findings as a result of this process, many of these finding impacts were low to medium. And it's worth noting here that TDOE praised both the commission for its organization and leadership, as well as the schools that participated.
Thank you, Beth. Are there any comments or questions related to commissioners? Yes,
Chair-
Commissioner Patterson?
The final item for the committee that we heard was an amendment petition from Bluff City High School, and so I'd like to recognize Beth and Tess to present this petition.
Thank you, Commissioner Patterson. As mentioned at yesterday's School Performance and Accountability Committee meeting, there was a robust conversation related to the amendment petition that was filed by Bluff City High School requesting a material modification to their charter agreement. As a reminder, just as a background, Bluff City opened in school year 17-18, and they operate in the southeast region of Memphis. They serve approximately 446 students in grades 9 through 12. Bluff City was placed on academic probationary status in the fall of 2022, and this was due to the school's failure to meet academic performance targets included in the Commission's academic performance framework. And while we are aware of the academic challenges, the amendment petition that is up for consideration today is really focused on some organizational shifts that need to occur within the network itself. And so Bluff City High School is operated by Green Dot Tennessee, who contracts with Green Dot National for back office services. This includes accounting, data, human resources, those types of services. In fall of 23, Green Dot Tennessee was notified that Green Dot National would be dissolving as of June 30th, 2024, and as a result, Green Dot Tennessee would need to assume those CMO responsibilities. And so with this change taking place at the end of the year, Green Dot Tennessee really does not have any other option other than to become a new CMO that would be responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations of their Tennessee-based schools. And so as a part of our process, we reviewed the amendment petition as well as the corresponding materials, and we found that by shifting to a Tennessee-based CMO, that the schools could benefit by the organization being devoted to the academic standards and initiatives specific to our state. The petition also included financial contingencies, detailed implementation plans, and steering committees that will be overseeing the replacement systems being put in place. And so while the petition itself really focuses on organizational changes, we worked very closely with the school and had some very transparent conversations surrounding the fact that these organizational shifts, though necessary, must also not interfere with the delivery of quality instruction, just given the probationary status that they currently are in. And so just as we close, included in the recommendation today is continued strict oversight that's specific to the plans and timelines that were outlined within the amendment petition itself. And we will continue to track their progress as they make these operational shifts, coming back to the commission at the July and October meeting with some updates. And so with that, I can take any questions.
Are there any questions for Beth? Yes. Commissioner Eddie Smith?
And this may be a question for, Tess, for you as well. So sticking to just the amendment petition, I want to make sure that because this is something that's somewhat new to us, and since this school existed before we did, we have a pretty robust pre-opening checklist. Do we have that same type of mechanism that if they're not meeting these things, for the fall, what are our options, I guess, really is what I'm looking at. I want to make sure that they're ready to go since their entire business model really is shifting fairly quickly.
Yes, so we have our intervention policy that we could follow that outlines the different kind of mechanisms that we can pull as their authorizer. And we do have a pre-opening process that we do put a lot of our schools through. An example is Libertas. We had an amendment that I believe it was last meeting, that they're going to be expanding. And so we hold our schools accountable. And if we see that they're getting off track at any point in time, we will be working with them through that probationary process and that intervention process that really outlines those different mechanisms and triggers that we can pull. But the school, I would say we've had some very good conversation with the school, and I would say that we always try to operate under a no surprise mentality with our schools, and there wouldn't be any surprises should we need to escalate any intervention. They're very aware of the need to deliver on a smooth operational transition.
And then I guess the only thing I'm just thinking through, from hearing about this yesterday in the committee meeting and just thinking through it, if the staff sees that things aren't going the way that we want, I guess do we have the provision, and Ashley, I'm now looking to you, do we have the provision for a special called meeting if need be to address some of those issues before our full July meeting?
Yes, we currently have a special call meeting held, marked on our calendar currently, that's before July, but the commission always has the right to call for a special call meeting if we find that there's emergency business that you all need to deliberate on.
Thank you.
I do not. Nothing further.
The only thing I would like to note, and Beth, if you would please confirm, there are also 3 other high schools that are operated by Green Dot in Memphis. They're part of the Memphis Shelby County LEA. And we're going to have to keep an eye on what happens with their amendment petitions and what is going on, because part of the success of this new CMO is going to be tied to them having enough scale to support the CMO. And I know that they've given us some assurances they could do it with less than 4 schools, but we need to be mindful of that. So we appreciate you keeping an eye on that as well.
And yes, that is correct. There are the 3 other schools that are operated by the ASD, and the ASD is, or the Achievement School District, they are in receipt of the amendment petition, and they will be preparing their recommendation. And the last I heard was by the end of this month, they'll have that to the school.
Okay, I correct my comments. It's not Memphis Shelby County, it's the ASD.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's why I wanted you to talk about it and not me, because you know actually what's going on better than I do. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the amendment petition and amended charter agreement from Bluff City High School?
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed say no. Hearing no noes, the ayes have it, and the amendment, petition and agreement are approved.
Madam Chair, may I
Yes,
make
sir.
one comment before we finish this section? Yesterday, when we were going through this, I just wanted to recognize the work test that you and the staff have done with our schools when we start looking at issues like students with disabilities, ESL learners, licensure. Those are issues that we know as a commission we've wrestled with for several years. But it was great to see the report yesterday and the improvements being made. So a lot of that I know goes to the team that supports what we do when we're not here, which we appreciate. But really getting our schools focused on these are important, they matter. And it was just great to see that report and the fact that there's real progress. So I just wanted to put that on the record, particularly because one of our former commissioners was very much focused on this issue. Thank you.
Commissioner Patterson, do you have any other comments or questions?
No further comments. Thank you.
I want to thank you and the work of the staff and the committee on these items. This was quite a bit of work and will require a lot of continuing work as we go forward in time. Our next item on our agenda is a presentation from General Counsel Ashley Thomas on open records, open meetings, and conflicts of interest. Ashley, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair Richards. So this is our annual refresher. We go over these things every year. I think it helps. It is, there's nothing wrong with going over it again, just so we know what we're doing as we go through our work. So we'll talk about open records, the Open Records Act, the Open Meetings Act, and then conflicts of interest. So to begin, the Open Records Act states that all records held by the state should be open for public inspection at any time. The staff, well, myself and Hayden, we tend to receive these requests and we fulfill those pursuant to commission rule and policy through compiling the records, reviewing and redacting where necessary, and then making them available to the requester. I think it's important to note here that unless there is an indicated exception, everything constitutes an open record for a state agency. This includes our commission agendas, our policies and procedures, any disclosure forms, including our conflicts of interest, all appeal-related matters, each charter agreement, including our emails, letters, form stacks, anything we receive is a record that is open for public inspection. In addition to the Open Records Act, the Commission is also required to comply with the Open Meetings Act, or you may have heard it called the Sunshine Law. To ensure compliance with that, the Commission goes through a couple of different steps. As a governing body, the Commission is required to comply with the Act. And a governing body is just two or more members that have the ability to deliberate and decide on policies or administration. There are a few exceptions to the Open Meetings Act, like advisory or executive sessions with the General Counsel, as well as any informational workshops. Because these don't include deliberation or a decision-making by the public body, it doesn't constitute a meeting. Like I said, to ensure compliance with the Open Meetings Act, there are a few steps that we undertake. We first ensure adequate public notice by posting the notice on our commission website and providing the dates in sufficient time for members of the public should they want to attend or participate. We're also statutorily required to live stream the meetings. Shout out to Drejon for always ensuring our compliance with that. We are required to publish our agenda, and that's handled by our Director of External Affairs. There has to be an ability for the public to have a presence in the meeting. And pursuant to Commission Policy 1.200, we comply with this prong by holding 30 minutes for public comment at the beginning of every commission meeting. And then finally, there must be minutes drafted of each public meeting. Staff also maintains those, and those minutes are approved by the commission as part of our quarterly meetings. If there's ever a finding that the commission somehow violated the Open Meetings Act, the result is that decision is nullified and the commission has to meet again in the open and deliberate and decide at that point. Moving on to the conflict of interest, each member of the commission is responsible for reviewing all charter school applications, hearing appeals, and carrying out all duties in a fair and impartial manner. And wherever possible, commissioners should avoid a conflict of interest between their private interest and their responsibilities as a commissioner. And so to that end, we ask each commissioner every year as well as the staff, to complete a conflict of interest form where any perceived or actual conflicts are disclosed to myself and to the executive director. If there's a finding of a direct conflict of interest, the request here is that you would recuse yourself from that vote in question. And if there's an indirect conflict, it's necessary for it to be publicly acknowledged. It does not necessarily disqualify you from voting, but we want to try to avoid an appearance of impropriety. Typically, the question that I always ask myself if there's a conflict is, are you able to make your decision from a fair and impartial standpoint, even in light of the thing that you know that may seem to create that conflict? I'm happy to say that as of today, all staff, all commissioners have completed their 2024 conflicts of interest, so thank you all for that. But I want to say that this is a living document, and so if at any time any new matter arises, please reach out to myself, reach out to Tess, and we'll kind of walk through that and see if that is something that we need to update your conflict of interest form, or if it's just something we need to disclose, and we will update the form from there. So I will stop here if there are any questions about anything I've talked about.
Thank you, Ashley. We appreciate the update and all your hard work throughout the year to keep us on the right side of these requirements. So, and I appreciate everybody getting the conflict of interest forms in. No. You know, you have to, if she doesn't get them, she will find you.
I tend to track you down.
She will find you.
Between Ashley throwing herself in front of the bus and our executive session to make sure we don't violate conflict of interest, we are well covered.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. I appreciate that. I take it as a compliment.
There you go. Thank you, Ashley. All right, the next item on our agenda is a refresher on the New Start appeals process from Director of Authorizing Beth Figueroa and General Counsel Ashley Thomas. Beth and Ashley, you're recognized. It's hard to believe we're back around to the time of year where new starts will be coming our way.
I was going to say thank you, Chair Richards, and you stole my thunder because I was just saying that we always are talking about that, or talking about New Start appeals, but this work really does take up the majority of our year. And as we go through the slides, you'll see that we are already well in the process of preparing for New Start appeals as applications work their way through the state. And so to begin today's presentation, always want to just point us back to quality authorizing standards. These are set by the State Department or State Board of Education. And at the end of the day, we are going to be held accountable for our New Start appeal process and running a rigorous process that's in line with not only their standards, but also our policies. And so this is something that we are always pointing back to in our work. And so next, wanted to provide just an overview of the active applications at this time. And so currently there are 10 active applications that are at the school district level. We have 4 applications with Memphis-Shelby County Schools, 5 with Metro Nashville Public Schools, and 1 with Rutherford. And so if you're curious how this compares with prior year, this time last year we had 20 active applications. And so there are quite a difference between this year and last year, and we're also seeing a difference in just the number of districts that are being applied to. So that's just for your reference of where we currently sit as far as active applications are concerned. And so in the past, when we did this presentation, we always focused on really the commission process that you all take in your consideration and deliberation. But considering that these applications are currently with the school district and local LEA, I thought it would be helpful just to kind of back up the bus and kind of just break down the different elements, because as Chair Richards was alluding to, this is really almost a year-long process. And so at this point in time, all applications are currently being considered at the local LEA level in working collaboratively with our district authorizers. Most of them are in the thick of it. They're doing their own capacity interviews, and then their LEAs will be voting in April. And after they do their vote on those initial applications, at that point, the applicant has an opportunity to submit an amended application. That generally takes place in May, with the LEA voting on the amended application in July. And so it gets initially considered, and then it gets considered in the amended form. And it's only if the application, the amended application is denied, that it has the opportunity to come to the commission on appeal. And so this is the flow chart that you all are much more familiar with us presenting. And so this work really kicks off in July and August for our staff. But once we receive an appeal, that's when we start working on collecting information from both the LEA as well as the applicant. We form review committees who are responsible for conducting the de novo review of the application. They're responsible for holding a capacity review with the applicant, and then staff and our executive director presides over a public hearing where we receive public comment. And all of that information goes into building out the record and her recommendation, which is presented to the commission at our October meeting. And so as you all review applications and deliberate on them, the Charter Commission has the opportunity to approve or authorize the school, or you also have the ability to affirm the LEA's decision, which would essentially be denying the application. And so looking just briefly at the key elements of the New Start process, as I mentioned, we receive information from the applicant or the appellate in this case, and that includes the amended application as well as the item I would really point you to is there is a 3-page statement that provides the explanation of why the local board's education's decision was contrary to the best interest of the students, LEA, or community. And then in a similar vein, we also collect information from the LEA, which includes records that are relevant to their decision-making process. So it's looking at their capacity interview, their review committee work, the items that were provided by the board, information that they used for making that decision, as well as the district's reason for denial. And then our review committee is also an integral part of this process. As I mentioned earlier, they are responsible for reviewing that amended application, conducting the capacity interview, and at the conclusion of their work, they produce a review committee report, which is included in the executive director's recommendation. Our general counsel later will be walking through what is meant by a de novo review, but I would just say here that the review committee, we really work to protect their work from any bias, and so we don't provide them with anything related to the district's reason for denial. We really want them to look at the application and do their own review and ratings. And then next, the public hearing. This is an important step because this provides us the opportunity to hear directly from the LEA as well as the sponsor as it relates to their proposed school. And so during each public hearing, there's the opportunity to ask questions directly of both parties. We hear public comments, and the information related to the public hearing is all included within the executive director's recommendation. And so as we prepare for the 2024 cycle, just a few items that I would provide updates on is as we went through our authorizer evaluation self-assessment, we determined that it's really important that we focus in on highlighting charter school autonomy for our review committee members, making sure that they understand that a charter school, you may not be the biggest fan of their model, or you might not necessarily be in agreement with certain elements, but you're really grounding your work in the rubric, understanding that the schools have that autonomy as they open their schools and operate. We also will continue to hold trainings with any potential LEAs and appellants. We started doing this over the last few years, and it was beneficial, but we also have certain LEAs that have gone through this process multiple times, and so we will be differentiating our trainings for them so that way we can honor their time. Another item is previous cycles. We've received a lot of real positive feedback about our weekly email, our communication. Some might say we over-communicate with everybody going through the process, and so we're going to continue that practice. And then as we update our guidance documents, we're always iterating on public comment and making sure it's very clear, especially ahead of the public hearing, just the process for signing up for Form Stack, how many slots per applicant, et cetera. So we are in the process of updating our guidance documents. And so at this time, I'll take any questions before I hand it over to Ashley.
Commissioner Lauren Smith.
Beth, I asked some questions yesterday about Invictus and Empower. Worried about them possibly having to delay a year, I was kind of reflecting on our timeline. So back when I worked at a charter network, we were approved in April 2013, opened in fall 2014, and that felt like a sprint to get everything solid and ready. Our schools don't get approved until October. I would just love to hear your thoughts. Have we, I know it would be hard to move it up, but do we think schools can truly pull off opening in the fall if they're not approved until October? What are our options? Like, could we pull it up? Could we encourage them to delay a year?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So I would say that as applicants go through the process, we do see certain schools apply with the already expected like 2-year out. So we have seen schools do that because it gives them that additional time. Any school that goes through the appeal process, to your point, does have a truncated timeline, and that's why our pre-opening process, we used to start it in January, but this year we backed it up and we actually started doing it as early as the fall for the specific purpose of making sure that we are regularly hitting home on facilities, enrollment, staffing. Those are like really like our 3 buckets that no pre-opening meeting takes place without discussing those items. But facilities is a challenge. It's something that we have our rubric that is created by the Department of Ed, and that is something that as we look at our rubric year over year, we continually try to go back to like, how can we update the rubric to be contextualized, especially for schools that are going and opening in new geographic regions. They come up against significantly different challenges than some of our other schools. But to your point with the schools that are currently going through the pre-opening process, one of the conversations we have with them is we don't view delaying a year as a bad thing, and we try to message that early on. Because they have the option to delay a year, all they have to do is ask for it, and we can give that to them. And so we know that that's not what schools want to hear. They are really determined to open as outlined in their application, but we just really try to say, like, as an authorizer, we don't view it as a bad thing. It's better for your families to tell them early versus over-promising and under-delivering. So those are just pieces that we continue to message. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Yeah.
Any?
Thank you, Chair Richards and Beth. And Commissioner Smith, there is some language in the current iteration of the statute that the commission can consider requiring a year delay, as well as the operator can always exercise that initial delay every year as well, just for additional context. But I wanted to go through the commission's statutory charge and requirements related to New Start appeals. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that there are 2 things the commission must do with regards to New Start appeals. First is hold an open meeting in the LEA where the proposed charter school submitted its application, and then there's conducting a de novo review of that application. The commission staff satisfies the first prong by conducting the public hearing in the sponsor's proposed geographic location. This meeting is recorded and it's included as a part of the appellate record. The second step, the de novo on the record review of the proposed application, really sets the parameters for what you all as commissioners can consider. The staff will compile that record for your review, and that record serves as the totality of the evidence in consideration for your vote. Diving deeper into the de novo standard, this standard states that the commission, basically it says the commission is not bound by the decision or reasoning of the local district in its assessment of that amended application. And that application, like I said, really serves as the foundation for your review. This slide here speaks to what is considered on the record. These items, all of these items support that amended application. As Beth mentioned a few of these items, but I kind of want to go a little bit deeper into that. In addition to that application, the record will include the notice of appeal, as she stated, and the exhibits related to that, the capacity interview that is conducted by our review committee, as well as their rubrics, the public hearing, all public comments, and then any clarifying documents that we are allowed to request by law. Like I said, because we are limited to that amended application, your consideration is limited to that amended application. There are certain things that we can't ask for because it would be perceived as unfair to the local district because they didn't have the opportunity to review that first. And it would go against what our appellate role is rather than being a direct authorizer. If after reviewing the record, the commission finds that the application meets or exceeds the Department of Education scoring rubric, and you find that approval is in the best interest of the students, LEA, or community, then the commission can approve that application. If you all approve that application, that school, the commission will become the authorizer for that school. I want to note that there is a 30-day reconciliation period in statute after the commission approves if you choose to overturn a local district's decision, that district and the applicant can mutually agree for the local district to remain that authorizer. If that decision is made, the commission's obligation ends there, and we have no further obligation to that school. I guess here I will stop if you have any further questions about the legal standards or any part of the appellate process.
I'd like to try to nail down Commissioner Lawrence Smith's question a little more effectively. It's my recollection, but please advise on what is the timeline for the original filing of these applications? Isn't that set by statute? And we don't have any ability to move that, if I recall correctly, but you're the lawyer, not me.
Right. Yes, those deadlines are set by statute. As Beth stated in her flow chart, we don't typically get the amended decision until summer, early summer. And so our timeline would start from the moment they file that appeal, and our 75 days runs till then. That sort of goes to how we set our commission meetings, and that's why we have the meeting in October. That hits us right about 75 days most years.
Commissioner Tudor?
Thank you, as always, for the precise and helpful analysis. I have one question, it may be an odd one. I'm kind of looking at it from the other way. Can you give me some examples of things that have popped up in the past that are not part of the record? I'm thinking, is that press, the rumor mill? I just want to be careful about what I'm taking in and making sure that I'm only considering what's on the record.
Right. Well, of course, naturally, we cannot avoid what news stories come out surrounding applications. I would say that as best you can, do not let that color what you see in the amended application, what you see in those supporting documents. If I'm thinking in cycles past, information that we have received are basically sweeping updates to where the local district may have found something, or even the review committee. Let's go with the review committee since it's a de novo review. The commission's review committee may find that the financial section of the application is lacking in some significant way. And then the applicant then has this information all of a sudden. We typically will not let them provide that information because that was not in the amended application. That is almost a new application, and the way statute currently is laid out, the local district gets first bite at that. That would be a new application, and so we don't allow that, and that wouldn't be a part of your record for consideration.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Ashley and Beth. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing what happens this year. The next item on our agenda is a policy and legislative update from Director of External Affairs, Hayden Pendergrass. Hayden, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Commissioners. It's been quite a busy year in the legislature related to education, as I'm sure you've noticed. I want to briefly update you on legislation affecting the Commission and our schools. First off, our confirmation hearings for Chairman Richards, Commissioner Griscom, and Commissioner Lawrence Smith went very smoothly, and their resolutions have all now been signed by Governor Lee. Our budget hearings are also now complete following our House hearing last week. Both went well, and we're not expecting any surprises as the budget moves closer to passage. The administration is presenting their budget amendment in both finance committees next Tuesday. I'm not sure if they'll be releasing the text of the amendment yet or simply giving an overview of changes from the budget that was presented in February. Additionally, committees in both the House and Senate have begun to close. Senate Education held their final meeting this past Wednesday, and the House K through 12 subcommittee is on their final calendar and will likely be closing next week, with the full committee closing the following week. Despite the Education Freedom Scholarships legislation dominating most of the education discussion on the Hill this year, there were a few bills filed related directly to charter schools that I want to go over. The Charter School Facilities Bill was originally filed last year, but wasn't moved forward until this year. As Commissioner Griscom mentioned yesterday, it would require LEAs where charter schools operate to maintain a list of vacant or underutilized properties that they own and make that available on their website. It would also give charter schools a right of first refusal if the LEA decides to sell or lease a property. The bill has passed the full Senate and several House committees and is currently scheduled to be heard in the House Finance Committee next week. There's a new amendment in that committee where it would require the charter school that purchased the property under this law to give the LEA a right of first refusal to purchase the property back should the charter school close or decide to sell that property. Last year, the General Assembly passed a bill providing 6 weeks of paid family leave to all licensed teachers for childbirth or adoption. However, the wording of the bill unintentionally excluded charter school teachers. Chairman Moody and Senator White have filed a bill to correct that oversight, which has passed the full Senate and is only awaiting a floor vote in the House, which will likely be the week after next. The Innovative School District Act from Chairman Mark White would essentially make the University of Memphis and potentially other state universities in the future their own LEA for the purposes of expanding their current campus school program. I included it here as the original version of the bill allowed for them to authorize their own charter schools. However, the latest version of the bill specifically excludes them from becoming an authorizer, but while still allowing them to act as their own LEA. They currently serve children from birth to 10th grade, and their enrollment's around 1,000 students. And then just this last week, Speaker Sexton introduced a revised version of the bill he filed last year related to charter schools for at-risk students. The bill would create a new category of schools called Opportunity Charter Schools. As currently written, students would have to be from a family at or below 200% of the poverty level and also fall into at least one of 8 other categories, including substance abuse, juvenile delinquencies, victims of abuse or neglect, been previously retained more than once, is pregnant or parenting, is chronically absent, or has previously dropped out. Opportunity charters could serve grades 6 through 12 and enroll students from any school district across the state. The local portion, as well as the state portion of TISA, would follow the student from their home district to the district where the school is located, and the school could not charge any additional tuition or fees. Opportunity charters could also operate a residential program, in which case they'd have to operate year-round. Applications to start an Opportunity Charter School would be treated the same as any other New Start Charter application and go through our current process should they be denied at the LEA where they applied. The State Board, in consultation with the Commission, would have rulemaking authority, and the Department, in consultation with the Commission, is authorized to create an application specific to Opportunity Charters. The Department will also have to convene an Opportunity Public Charter School Working Group to provide input in creating a new performance framework for Opportunity Charters, which would then require approval from the State Board. The bill has currently passed the Senate Education Committee as well as the House Subcommittee and scheduled to be heard in the House Full Committee next week. I want to briefly run through a number of other bills that aren't charter specific but apply to all schools statewide. A bill requiring all schools to provide age-appropriate firearm safety training has passed the House and is headed to the full Senate for a vote. The Departments of Education and Safety would work with TWRA to develop a curriculum that is viewpoint neutral and focused on safe storage and school safety. As you've probably seen in the media, a bill restricting what types of flags that could be displayed on school grounds has been working its way through the legislature. It has passed the full House but has not been scheduled for a vote on the Senate floor yet. A couple of other updates to the Age Appropriate Materials Act that was passed last year have also been filed this year. A bill that would codify who has standing to file a lawsuit over violations of the act has passed the House and the Senate Education Committees, but has been placed behind the budget due to potential fiscal impacts to cities and counties. Another bill that requires a review of complaints related to age-appropriate materials within 60 days of the complaint being filed has passed both the House and Senate, and there's an amendment that differs slightly between the two bodies, so it will require another vote before heading to the governor. A bill banning cell phones and electronic devices during instructional time unless they are provided by the school failed in House Education Administration this week. Chairman Lundberg was the Senate sponsor of the bill and publicly expressed his disappointment in that vote, so it's likely a similar bill will come back in a future session. A couple other bills making changes to the curriculum that have been moving forward, including a study of alternative subjects that could be substituted for the Algebra 2 graduation requirement. Several changes to the family life curriculum have also been proposed. One bill that's already been signed by the governor adds topics such as human trafficking and online crimes against children to that family life curriculum. All schools would also have to submit their contact information for their child abuse coordinators and any employee or community partner that provides family life instruction, as well as the specific curriculum they've selected. And they would have to file those reports annually with the Department of Children's Services. Finally, another bill requiring the inclusion of a 3-minute CGI or ultrasound video depicting human fetal development has passed the House and is awaiting a Senate floor vote. Those are the highlights from session so far. I'll have a more comprehensive summary of legislation affecting our schools early this summer. The final two topics I want to touch on have gotten a lot of media attention, so I'm sure you're familiar with them. First, the Governor's Education Freedom Scholarship Initiative has made it through its first few committee hearings, and the versions differ significantly between the two bodies. The Senate version makes a few changes to the initial proposal from Governor Lee. The biggest addition is the inclusion of accountability testing. Students attending private schools with scholarships would be required to take an annual norm reference test between 3rd and 11th grade. The ELA TCAP, or a equivalent test approved by the state board, would be required in 3rd grade. The math TCAP or its equivalent would be required in 8th grade, and the SAT, ACT, or equivalent would be required in 11th grade. The other noteworthy change in the Senate version is the ability to use the scholarship to cover tuition for attending a public school outside of the LEA in which the student resides. With the adoption of our out-of-district enrollment policy earlier today, this version of the bill would allow a student from out of district to attend one of our schools using the scholarship to cover the local TISA portion that the family would normally be responsible for. The Senate bill has passed the Education Committee, is headed to Finance next, but has not yet been scheduled for a hearing. The House version of the bill has multiple major differences from the Senate version. Like the Senate version, it would be restricted to 20,000 scholarships in the first year of the program, but following that, the number could only increase by 20% year over year instead of becoming universal. The scholarships could only be used for tuition at non-public school, and it specifically excludes homeschool programs as well. There are a number of additional proposals in the bill unrelated to the scholarship program, including additional TISA funding for teacher health plans, less frequent evaluations for high-performing teachers and principals, reductions in student testing to only what is required by federal law, additional flexibility in 3rd and 4th grade retention, and termination of the Achievement School District in 2026, which I'll touch on more in just a moment. The House bill has passed through the Education Sub and the full committees, as well as Government Operations, and is scheduled to be heard in the Finance Subcommittee next week. Both bills still have a long way to go, and it's too early to predict what the final version of the bill might include. Since I mentioned the ASD provisions in the House Education Freedom Scholarship Bill, I thought I'd expand a bit on what other discussions have been taking place surrounding the ASD. In addition to that bill, Senator Agberry passed a bill in Senate Education this week, which would also terminate the ASD and replace it with what the bill calls local collectives for student success. These LCSSs could be created by the Commissioner of Education in any district where a priority school exists, and any school designated as a priority school could be assigned to the LCSS. Schools within the LCSS would be run by one of three entities: a charter operator selected by the Geographic LEA, a public university under contract with the Geographic LEA, or an independent school turnaround expert, similar to the current turnaround pilot program that's ongoing. Schools in the LCSS would be jointly administered by the department and the Geographic LEA. This bill has not been scheduled for a floor vote in the Senate yet. The House version of the bill passed the Education Committee last year and is currently held on the clerk's desk pending a motion to hear it. That version of the bill would sunset the ASD and require the department to create an education portal containing resources for LEAs related to school turnaround. And the final item I'd like to go over are the discussions related to fourth grade retention. As I mentioned, the House version of the EFS bill contains some language related to retention, but there's also a standalone bill that passed the Senate Education and House Education Subcommittee this week. The new bill would allow promotion to fifth grade through one of three pathways. First is adequate growth on the fourth grade ELA TCAP as the law currently stands. If the student does not display adequate growth on TCAP, then they could take a locally adopted benchmark test to demonstrate adequate growth. If they have still not demonstrated adequate growth following the benchmark test, the school would then be required to hold a parent-teacher conference, including the school principal, to determine if the student should be promoted to the fifth grade or retained. If the student is promoted, the bill requires that the additional interventions offered to students under the existing third and fourth grade retention law be offered to the student for the entirety of fifth grade. Schools would also be required to develop individual support plans for each student promoted to fifth grade who had not demonstrated adequate growth. The department would then also be tracking those students, and if a school seems to be habitually promoting students that are continuing not to display adequate growth, they would be required to amend those individual support plans. So that's kind of the broad overview of where the legislature stands at the moment, and I'm happy to answer any questions before I pass it off to Tess to discuss where the rest of fourth grade retention currently stands.
Commissioner Griscom?
Madam Chair, this is just a comment. On your update on the Freedom Scholarships, glad to hear that, particularly the part about, in the Senate version, the opportunity to have these funds that would go for out-of-district. As you said earlier, we adopted a rule in this meeting today. But the reason I bring it up is I think it's important for us to make sure people understand that while we are public schools, charter schools or public schools, we are an option. And we need to make sure that that is well understood, that, you know, if you're looking for another place for your child to go to school, that charters need to remain part of that discussion. And so that we don't get lost that it's only going to a private type school. In my mind, it's going to offer options for other students to look at where they would like to get an education, and that charters are part of that. So I would hope that we sort of figure out how best to communicate that, and how that as people talk about this program that's probably going to pass in some form, that charters remain as part of that option, rather than being excluded and being said, well, it's just another public school. So I just want to make that comment, and for us as a charter commission to think through how best to make sure that that remains a viable option for these parents.
Commissioner Addie Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, Hayden, a lot of information in there. I've been following session, as you know, and the one that you mentioned that has just kind of, I guess I missed it, was the opportunity charters, especially with related to possible year-round if they're doing residential. So that being said, I don't want to dive into it too much, but I think this is something that we need to take very seriously as we start thinking about our strategic visioning, about some of the things that may be needed in the future that we didn't expect a couple of years ago. So when we get to that point later on, it's just take all of that and kind of start thinking about that 10-year, 5-year window. 10 years is a long time for anybody to think about. Most people can't think 10 minutes ahead. The other one, and I think Tess is going to probably address it with the fourth grade, but you know, one of the things that I've pushed for years is, you know, schools you don't want the legislature to have to do what they're doing, which is this third grade, fourth grade retention. So I guess the question is, you know, as we look ahead and becoming that high-quality authorizer that we want to be, what are we doing to really encourage our schools in that K-1 and 2 for some of the benchmark testing and things to make sure that we can start avoiding this third and fourth grade reading retention because our students are better prepared? So I can't force and tell we need to hold others accountable if we're not doing the same thing. So I'm just asking that question as I see Tess is now eagerly waiting to come to the podium.
On the opportunity charters, I wouldn't say you missed it. Tracking session, that amendment just came out this past Monday, it's a rather new.
I'm just sitting here
development.
going, how in the world did I miss that? That was like.
No, that proposal was just released and voted on this week. So there will be another hearing in the full House committee next week where I think there will be a little more full discussion. Everybody's had a little more chance to digest that amendment. And in terms of the third and fourth grade retention, I think the legislature is at a point where a lot of members don't want to back up they're trying not to lower the standards to continue allowing children to go on, but finding ways to incorporate those high quality interventions that were adopted and making sure that children at all those grade levels, regardless of whether or not they've shown adequate growth, have access to those additional tutoring that has shown a lot of promise so far in terms of recovery after the pandemic, and really has shown a lot of growth in that kind of small focused tutoring. So I think one of Senator White's impetuses for adding this to her bill was making sure that we're not holding these students back over and over again, but making sure they still have access to all of these additional supports that we've implemented.
And I agree with all of that. And I guess where my comment was more geared toward is that third grade, fourth grade should be more of a backstop, whereas right now the districts are using it as this has been forced on us. So really, as we think about how in that K-1 and 2 do we start implementing these things early on, so that it's only a backstop and not a reactionary, because now 40% of our kids are only going forward, under the reading. So that's where the discussion with a lot of the districts that I've had over years has come down to, which is just start thinking ahead and start doing things without the legislature telling you have to in that K-1 and 2 space.
Are there any other comments or questions for Hayden? Hayden, we appreciate it. There's a lot going on. Just keep us posted, and we'll see where we go. All right. I'm going to turn
I want
this
to
over.
touch very briefly on the State Board of Education's discussions on third and fourth grade, because they do have rulemaking authority when it comes to a broad scope of laws, but in particular, there was a robust discussion at their February meeting around third grade pathways, and also the discussion around what the current law is in fourth grade. So in particular, I wanted to talk about what the current pathways are for third grade students, which is a change from what they were last year. This is a change in law that was made in last General Assembly, but is being implemented this year for the first time. So for students who score below or approaching, there are three promotion pathways. So first is to take a retest of the ELA TCAP and to achieve proficiency. That's what Lawrence was talking about. There is a window of time where that ELA TCAP retake can take place. Participation in a learning loss summer camp, and also to include participation in fourth grade tutoring. The new pathway that was not present last year, there's some nuances here, is that to a student to achieve the 50th percentile on a state provided benchmark assessment. And so this would be in addition to the universal reading screeners that students are already taking, that's required under the foundational literacy law, would be a state provided benchmark assessment. Actually, districts, we received information about that yesterday, so we'll be working with our schools to implement that. If a student achieves approaching and then scores in the 50th percentile on the state benchmark, they would be promoted to the fourth grade. Currently, the only pathway for promotion for a student who was promoted to the fourth grade with those additional supports is to achieve adequate growth on the fourth grade TCAP. The State Board of Education approved the adequate growth model at their February meeting. That was provided by the Department of Education. So at this point, we have our adequate growth information for our students in our districts. We have provided that to our schools. One of the challenges right now, and what the legislature is really wrestling with, is there is currently no option for a fourth grader to be promoted if they do not achieve adequate growth. And so I think what we are seeing a lot of the conversation is that how do you both support students in making growth on TCAP and increasing their literacy, but also if they don't meet adequate growth, how could they potentially be promoted to the 5th grade with additional supports? And so I think we are very interested to see how that impacts what our students in our district are currently potentially facing. We have been told that from a department level, we will get results on 4th grade students in our district who achieve adequate growth by July the 1st. So we would then be able to have our schools communicate that information to parents. We will keep you all updated on how this is evolving over the next several weeks.
Commissioner Levine.
Yeah.
Is there any data yet in terms of what we expect, what percentage of kids in the 4th grade that get all the supports and still haven't achieved enough growth? Is there any expectation as to what that percentage might look like?
The Department of Education has shared what their projections potentially are. I'd have to go back to see what and quote exactly what they say, so I don't want to misquote. I think currently, and Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong, we think about 40-ish% of our students may be in this adequate growth pathway. But some of this data is to be determined. I will say one of the challenges we have as a district in determining this information is we have new schools and new students who have come to our district from last year. So as a district, we know the adequate growth for our students who were in our district last year, but if you've transferred in, we then have to seek out that information from a previous district. So that's what we're currently working through. But I think, there is a good portion of students who are in 4th grade right now who've been promoted via the additional interventions that this will apply to.
Commissioner Tudor.
I just want to make sure I understand the implications of this. So, 3rd grader below or approaching, in order to get to 4th grade, agrees for the required tutoring, is now in 4th grade. In order to get promoted to the 5th grade, they have to hit this adequate growth benchmark.
Correct.
They don't hit it. They find out July 1st, so the student and the parents, and also the school, is finding out ultimately how many people are going to be in 4th grade 4 weeks before school starts?
That is the current timeline, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and to follow up on Commissioner Tudor, that's concerning. But the second one is, because we've had students transferring in, if those home districts aren't getting it till July 1st, we may not get it till a week or so before. Things don't move fast in government. We all know that. So if we're waiting on trying to get that information to do the calculations, we could be in a scramble 10 days or less before the start of the school year.
Yes, we will need to make sure that the department communicates which of our students met adequate growth based on the current district roster.
So is there any way, I guess my question is who's setting the July 1st? Is that the Department of Education?
That is the department when they shared information and updates to the State Board of Education. The July 1st is where they said that districts will know adequate growth for students by July 1st. They will share the file and the information with districts.
I guess the question is there a way that we could communicate back to the State Board that they really ought to be pushing the department probably sometime before June 15th? 2 extra weeks is a lot.
Yes, and I would say, I know that the State Board of Education has a meeting in May, and my anticipation is this will be on the agenda because they're waiting to see what the General Assembly is going to do. I think all districts are sitting in the exact same spot about how do we both communicate with parents what is happening, communicate with parents what changes may be occurring, and then to turn around the data on fourth grade adequate growth very quickly.
Tess, did you say one of the options they're considering is kind of requiring like summer tutoring or summer learning loss?
That's correct, and Hayden can correct me, but one of the options that is being considered is that even if a student does not achieve adequate growth, that they could be promoted to the fifth grade with continued interventions, tutoring, et cetera. I think the common conversation has both at the State Board of Education and at the legislature is we have students that quote unquote have done everything we've asked them to do. They have attended the summer learning loss camps. They're in intensive reading intervention in fourth grade. They're making progress, but they're just not hitting that adequate growth bar. Is that a place where we would want to retain them in the fourth grade? Or is there an avenue to promote them, but still provide them the intensive tutoring into the fifth grade?
Any other questions?
Sorry. Okay. How can families take advantage of summer learning loss if we're not finding out about it until 2 weeks to 10 days before the school year starts?
So a student in the third grade, so let's talk about, we're going to go back to third grade for a second. In the third grade, a parent knows whether or not their child has achieved approaching or below immediately by the end of May, because as Lauren said yesterday, they're fast tracking that result to districts and then to districts to schools. So that's where schools get to, and parents get to determine, do I want to take the retake within that 10-day window? Or do I want to just say, my child got approaching, we're going to go ahead and start with the summer learning camp. So for third graders, they're getting that information, parents are getting that information by, let's say the end of May, so that they can make the decision for the summer and what is the pathway that they want to take for their student. Fourth grade is one that currently, if the adequate growth is that districts would get that information by July 1st.
And my concern only affects the fourth grade.
Yeah,
Third grade,
got it.
that one's
Yeah.
fairly, this is what concerns me though about the fourth grade to fifth grade is districts not getting it till July 1st. Again, for us, waiting on districts to get that information to us to make determinations and communication can cause chaos going into the fall for promotion.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
just us, but every district across the
Yes.
state.
Yes.
Okay. This is where I think that we need to really talk to the state board about, we need their help to push the department to get the fourth grade stuff out like they have the third.
Yes. And that concludes I will just say, I think we're going to know a lot over the next month around where both third grade promotion pathways and fourth grade promotion pathways land as the General Assembly wraps up. So as we get that additional information, I will provide an update to you all on what that's looking like, both for our district, but also districts across the state.
Tess, I just have one additional comment. I want to echo what Commissioner Grissom mentioned. With the probable passage of some variation on the voucher bill, I think it is going to have a significant potential impact on charters, both the ones that we operate, but charters across the state. And we're going to need to figure out a way to maintain communication so that our schools can continue to attract students. Because if they lose a significant number of students to private schools, and keep in mind, there are already, parents who have made the step of going outside their assigned geographic public school, so they may be more inclined to make an additional choice to go to private school, that we monitor our enrollment numbers, because I'm really concerned about what this will do to our enrollments for our operators.
Yes. No, but I do think I'm the next agenda item, so I'll just,
Yeah.
I'll just hang here until.
You just stay there.
Madam Chair, before,
Before you stay there, I've been asked for a 10-minute break.
Okay, I can do that. Yeah.
We go on break. Commissioner Carter has one
this will
more.
be real quick. I think there's so many moving parts to, again, what's going on. It just is in terms of, I think, what we as a commission have to look at. And, we need to stay within our box in terms of what it is that we do, what we're charged with as far as responsibility, but the need to look at making sure we're informed. We're not impacting public policy here, in general. That's not our charge. But I think particularly for, even though I've been on the commission board for maybe a year, I think I finally know where the restrooms are. But it's still a very much a learning process. And the need to look at continually being enlightened about kind of where things are in terms of education and how it's impacting, because these things are really, really significant in terms of what's taking place. I think it's important. So for me, it's really an issue, what are our threats? What are our threats as a commission? That in fact, whether it's talking about vouchers, or again, the scholarship program that we're talking about, that's something that I think we got to look at in terms of making that part of our agenda. Not that we're going to look at having ongoing conversations with legislators. That's not what we are. But I do think that there's a need to make sure, as I said, we're enlightened. And that we truly, again, have a sense of, again, what collectively, from a synergistic standpoint, we need to look at making sure we're all on the same page. So we're all reaching out the same hymnal. And so that's what I'm going to want to continue to charge the staff with, I think, trying to make sure that you provide us with.
You can think about is adding to your weekly updates, because I think because this stuff changes so quickly, and especially while the legislature's in session, it might be worthwhile to add a more detailed section in your weekly updates that we know you will have gotten from Hayden, but that might help keep people up to date, because, this one thing dropped on Monday of this week.
Again, for that purpose of being enlightened, being knowledgeable and aware. Okay? So if I'm having a conversation with Governor Lee, and we're talking about, again, charter schools, again, to the degree that there's a need to say, hey, Gov, for me, can't speak for the commission. This is really something important. I want you to hear me. And I want you to know kind of what my position is on this. Well, whether the hell he does anything with it,
That's a different problem.
Great.
Well, can't ever tell if this thing's on. So on that, one of the things that we might want to look at again as we start thinking about the vision and moving forward is that something we need to add kind of to the business operations, where we have maybe a week during session where we at least have not a meeting, but a phone call that's only one way, so Hayden can only talk to us to kind of give us an update. Because see Ashley over in the corner saying you cannot deliberate outside of a meeting. But just so that we've got that, because again, reading it versus hearing it, because then there's ability to come back with some additional questions. Might be something worthwhile for the business operations to look at, so that we kind of are able to bring a little bit more of that discussion when we have our January and March meetings.
I completely agree. And, I would say, Commissioner Smith, we just did our open meetings refresher. So we will make sure that anything is in compliance with the open meetings law. My only request, Chair Richards, is that I think the next two items are going to be very quick. And so my wondering is, do we just take these very quick items and then we take a break?
I think I've already.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Okay.
Oh, man.
So I beat her in 14. She ran against me again in 16, and I beat her again. And then she ran against me and beat me.
Okay, we're going to round back up. Ms. Stovall, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have brief updates for you all from my role as executive director. So first, want to remind commissioners about our remaining 2024 meeting dates. So first, we do have a special called meeting held in June, as we've discussed, should there be any business that we need to address. Otherwise, we will take that down. We have a meeting, in-person meeting in July in Chattanooga. We cannot wait for Commissioner Griscom to give us the full tour. And no.
On the tutu, on the Chattanooga tutu. You want to go on the Chattanooga tutu?
And then we will be back here in Nashville for our October meeting. As a reminder, that will be the meeting that we handle New Start appeals. As I mentioned to the Business Operations Committee yesterday, between now and July, we will be setting our 2025 meeting dates. They will come to you all for approval in July. So please look out for a survey from the staff to gauge whether or not we will be able to achieve quorum on suggested dates. We'll stick with the general being January, March, early April, July, and October. Because those are driven by statutory deadlines, but we will please look out for that as well. We, as Hayden mentioned, we did have 3 commissioners who got confirmed at the General Assembly, but I did want to note that we do have 3 commissioners whose initial term on the Charter Commission is up June 30 of this year. So that's Terrence, Eddie, and Jamie. So we'll be looking for information from the governor's office regarding appointments. And as a reminder, these are the final initial appointments, and all appointments from here on out, the term is now for 5 years. And the final note I wanted to make is that the timeline for staff and the state's employee annual reviews has moved up. And since we do have some new commissioners who are on the commission from previous annual reviews, I wanted to give a high-level overview of what that's going to look like, particularly for my role. And so what typically happens is that I will send out a brief survey about where you can provide me feedback on progress towards goals, anything you'd like for me to focus on for the upcoming year. And you'll turn those surveys into Ashley. Ashley will then share that with Chair Richards, who will consolidate all of the feedback and provide me my annual evaluation. This is the annual evaluation is required of all state employees. It then gets turned into Human Resources as I do for all of my employees as well. So I wanted to give you a heads up that you will be receiving a separate survey and ask for feedback that will be turned in to Ashley. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
We appreciate it and appreciate your updates. The next item on our agenda is a charter agreement for Rocket Ship Nashville Northeast Elementary. presented by General Counsel Ashley Thomas. Ashley, you're recognized for this matter.
Thank you, Chair Richards. The rocket ship Northeast Nashville renewal application was approved by this commission at our January meeting. The agreement would be for a new 10-year term. Between January and today, I've worked with the legal team for rocket ship to come to agree on the terms and negotiate the terms of that charter agreement. That agreement closely mirrors the rocket ship Dream agreement that's currently under the commission's portfolio. Rocket Ship Northeast Nashville is in the middle of the pre-opening process. This is a school that's already open, but because they're changing authorizers, I know they've been working with Trent, and we've also gone through and looked at their waivers and updated their waivers. That also now mirrors Dream, the Dream waivers, and so unless there are questions about any of the terms, I think this will be ready for a vote, Chair Richards.
Are there any questions for Ashley? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve this agreement? All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that agreement is approved. Final item on our agenda is a strategic plan and visioning update from Manager of Strategic Initiatives, Regine Cummings. At the January meeting, there was some discussion about the need for the commission and staff to undertake work around visioning for the future of the commission, separate from the work on our strategic plan. After that meeting, I asked Commissioner Lauren Smith if she could act as the commission liaison to staff this work, which she generously did, and I really appreciate what you've done. It was tremendously helpful. After Regine's presentation, we as a commission are going to take some time to discuss some key questions to provide feedback and direction to the staff on where we are as a commission and what we want out of the visioning work. This will help us prepare for our July meeting where we'll have a further conversation. So Regine, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Chair Richards. Good morning. Really excited to be here today to talk through, one, some updates on our strategic plan, and then, as she mentioned, to talk through some visioning work. So updates here on our strategic plan. We are on track for Q3. We're making progress towards all of our goals. And as you can see, under each strategic priority, I've included a few highlights that really point out what we've been doing this past quarter. As my colleagues mentioned yesterday and both today, we are doing a lot of work. Wanted to shout out here, though, RBM. I know that took a lot of work from the team, and so happy that that is complete this quarter. So moving on, at the January meeting, there was a lot of discussion from commissioners about our agency, the future, especially as we scale and grow. And so tasked with that, the team came back and engaged in a conversation. Director Stovall and Commissioner Lauren Smith, we all sat down with staff to talk through what does this look like? What does visioning mean? And what do we hope? I'm going to share kind of high-level thoughts about what we discussed. And then, as Chair Richards mentioned, at the end, we'll talk through y'all's thoughts about what visioning work should look like. We don't plan to have this to be fully formed today. Excuse me. The purpose of the conversation is just to get your feedback and get your thoughts, and then we'll take that and move to have that conversation in July. I've included here a central question, which is, what do commissioners want this visioning work to look like? What's our ultimate goal? And as I present throughout today, if you can kind of keep that at the forefront for us to discuss at the end. So to help frame our conversation, I really wanted to give us some kind of key terms of how we're thinking about this work as staff. So we have vision, which is the long-term overarching picture of what we hope to achieve. And then down from there, we have strategy, which is that medium-term plan designed to achieve a specific goal or vision, which is our strategic plan. Down from that one step, we have tactics, which are the specific short-term actions that we do to implement strategy. And this really is the day in and day out work that we do. So moving from there, we had a really great conversation. It was really nice to be in the office to talk through this work. The first thing that we talked about was, what are the things that we won't compromise on as an agency and district? Really, what are those non-negotiables of who we are at our core? And this is what we identified. First is quality application reviews. Second, accountability for schools. Next, positive relationships with stakeholders. And then finally, prudent fiscal reporting and budgeting. From there, after we discussed kind of who we are at our core, we talked through some desired outcomes as an agency. We want to be sure that we continue to be a district that's rated as advancing or exemplary, making sure that we consistently meet our authorized evaluation goals, and that we have an overall strong portfolio. So coming from that conversation, we really wanted to talk through, we know who we are, we know what we want to achieve, but what do we need to do that? We came up with about 6 things. First is a well-aligned staffing plan. As we continue to grow, we want to make sure that we have the right number of staff to support the work. We also talked through clear expectations and support for commissioners. As Tess mentioned, we will have commissioners cycling through, so we want to make sure that you all are onboarded and engaged to be able to support us in the work. Next is processes and systems that allow for scaling. We talk about this often as a team, just kind of even year-to-year growth, but thinking longer term for the future, we know that we'll need to think about this for our vision. We also talked a bit about target support for the portfolio, and this is really just kind of making any adjustments that we might need to make sure that we're doing exactly what we need to support our schools. That might look different, right? What we do now might need to look different 10 years from now, but we know we need to still provide that targeted support. Next is really being sure that we're clear about our strategic plan and how that will interact with the vision work. The strategic plan is something that we plan to keep in place to make sure we're holding ourselves accountable. But what I'd like to talk to you all about is, what does that look like? How does this all interact with each other? Being really clear about that. And then finally, making sure we have the right funding that supports portfolio growth. So at the end of that discussion, we really decided that it would be best to hear from you all. So we came up with some questions that we'd like to pose to you to kind of think through for our discussion today. First is, what do commissioners want this visioning work to look like? Next is, what is the time horizon for the visioning work? And then finally, what specific information would be helpful to review at upcoming meetings for this discussion? As I mentioned, Commissioner Smith was with us to talk through this, so I'll turn it to her first if she has anything to share.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for letting me do this. It's been fun to work with the staff, and I'm looking forward to the process in the months to come. But I think what I really want to hear, I know that this has been brought up by commissioners that this is needed. It obviously can go a lot of different directions, so I'd love to just spend this time hearing from my fellow commissioners, what are you hoping will come out of this, or specifically, pieces of the commission's work that you want us to focus on and visioning. Obviously, we're kind of a reactive body. We can't control what comes to us, but then we have control of a lot of things once it gets to us. So just really wanted to hear from you guys before we start diving into this work further, what direction you want us to go.
Yes, go ahead.
So in answer to your question, I want to park visioning for a sec and talk about the strategic plan, because when we did this, when you worked with Chase and we put it together, we were still in a a position then of building out the commission, of trying to figure out who we were, what we do, how we do it, building a staff that today is very robust. So I would hope that part of this process also is probably taking a little time and looking at the strategic goals we set. And do we want to come in also and say some of those strategic goals, probably now with where we are, we might want to change them, amplify them, do something with them. So, Lauren, in answer to your question, and on the visioning part I'll come back to, but I would hope that part of it also is, because I've found in the past working on strategic plans that, while we say they're for a 3 to 5 year window, usually a couple years in, it's good to stop. And I think for us, I think it really is good to stop and look at, because we are very different now. We are doing the things that we all set out and we were asked to do when we were appointed. And now not only do we have, what we do as an appellate group, but we've got a school system that we're running. And I think at the time that we thought about this, we knew that was out there someplace, but I don't think we necessarily set up a strategic plan to really understand what does that mean and how does that fit in. So I would hope that that's part of it as well, as we talk visioning, that we come back and take this opportunity to look again at the strategic goals we set, and are there some adjustments that we might want to make in there as well.
Commissioner Eddie Smith?
Thank you. And, going back to one of the things you said is, the clear expectations and support for commissioners, ensuring new members understand the charge of the agency and their roles. One of the things that, and I've said it several times, that I hope, whether I, am fortunate enough to serve another 5 years or whoever follows, one of the things that I really want to make sure that every commissioner understands is, our role is to be noses in, but hands out. If the commission starts trying to run the day-to-day operations, this is going to fail because we're not here every day doing this. That's why we hired Tess, to be honest with you, as the executive director, and then really let her hire the staff, is because we have 100% confidence in Tess. But also looking ahead, we've got to have that same confidence, in future leaders, because, none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. So we always have to be thinking with a mind towards that. The other thing, and I think Tom brought it up best, which is, when we started this work, it was really just building the framework that's gotten us to where we are today. But, as we've gone through it, and I kind of have been drawing out just listening to everybody, we really have two main functions right now. We have the LEA function as a district, and then we have the authorizer and the appellate body, which is not completely different, but they are massively different processes. So I think what we need to really look at is, does our current strategic goals and strategic plan align to what that structure is? But then, going back to, and maybe by July, if we could kind of have, a sketch work of, here's where we are now, but then based on some of the changes that, the legislative session will be done, we'll know some of the things that we're looking at. And to the best of our ability, looking into the crystal ball, for the next 5 years, if things continue on the trajectory of, we've got some now, 10 years of historical precedence of what's happened within the legislature around the charter world. If we kind of infer that into the future, that things kind of stay where they are now with a little bit, what does our staffing need to look like? Because, talking with Tess, while we have an executive director, she's really fulfilling the role of 3 people. So what does she need to bring on to help that may be, I hate to use the term director of schools, but think of it as superintendent or director of schools that oversees the LEA function of us, and maybe a director of the appeals authorizer, to lighten the load, but also give some support to Tess, but then making sure that we're highly effective in those areas, because again, it's not approaching, but, I want us to be exemplar. Second is not good enough for me. I want us to be one of the best. But at the same time, we've seen tremendous growth in our portfolio. If you had told me in 2020, kind of like Chris joked that we were going to meet in February of 2020 and not see each other again for 18 months, I'd have told you you're crazy, and that we were going to launch a whole new state agency in the middle of all of that. But then think about the other thing that happened right near the end of that, which is the change with the ASD. So there's been a lot of massive shifts, even as we've been going down this work that we've had to respond to. So it's really thinking through that. I guess I always start with, if you had the best of both worlds, what would that end structure look like to start building into it, and then setting the timeline of when would these things need to happen if X happens. Like, if the legislature came back and said, okay, while we're not now, we become a direct authorizer. They can bypass the LEA. Well, what does that do to change, and what we need to bring on so that we've got that structure in place, ready to respond to any potential change that the legislative body over us might push down. So those are the things that just kind of go through my mind. It's an if this, then that more plan, not knowing what might happen.
Thank you.
This may be completely unapplicable here and off the reservation, but I have the privilege of serving on the State University System Board in Florida, and about 10 years ago, we implemented, at the time, everybody thought it was crazy, but we did it, and it led to our system being ranked the #1 system in the country. And we started what's called performance funding, but we basically established about 10 metrics that were really relevant And I don't know if that's outside our sandbox or not, but for schools that are within our purview, what are the important metrics that really matter to us in terms of student achievement? And are there mechanisms we can deploy as a governing body? I agree with Eddie. I mean, we don't need to manage them, but we do need to be saying what we think the priorities are. And we want to be able to, either through incentive or otherwise, get everybody aligned on those things. And I like I said, this may be completely foreign at this level, because I know we look at things like third grade reading and stuff like that everybody agrees on. But what are some milestones beneath that maybe we can prioritize and say, these are things we take an interest in as a governing body. You schools come up with your plans for how you're going to achieve this stuff. And it may not be that we're at a point where we can deploy something like that yet, but I think it's worth in our strategy talking about whether or not we think that ought to be our strategy. And I'm sorry, one more thing. Just so I'm clear, I'm not saying it's a one-size-fits-all either, because within our performance metrics, each school where there's opportunity for improvement can develop metrics unique to that school's issues. So it's, we decide the ones that are high level, very important, but there's also some number of those metrics that we let the schools determine based on where their most important improvement opportunity is.
Commissioner Carter?
So try these on. You ready?
Ready?
We talk about visioning. We want to be the best practice state commission that provides, and I'm going to use what Eddie just mentioned, okay? That provides LEA and authorizer oversight to our portfolio of schools. That's one. I only have two. Let's go real quick. So you want to repeat, or you got it?
I got it.
You got it. Second one is to maintain and build high-performance personnel staff that provides continued support to our client base.
Jamie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a little bit building on the visioning comments that Michael just made. So one of the things that we don't have to solve this moment, but visioning versus strategy, a visioning exercise is where do you want to go? Strategy is how do you want to get there? And so I want to just be really, and to imagine a visioning plan, I want to make sure that we're not actually building a strategic plan that we think will last for 10 years, because strategic plans typically, we want them to last 5 years. They are typically valuable for 3, even in our best efforts. And so I think that's one thing. And to me, it's like, what's the horizon point that we're aiming for? Do we want to be the highest performing authorizer in the nation, and what does that look like? That feels like, to Michael's comments, like that's a vision that we're casting. But then what are the strategic measures? How are we going to measure that over whatever amount of time? I actually think it's totally possible, to Alan's comments, that we would have a set of measures that could live beyond 3 to 5 years. That feels very relevant. I think one thing that would be helpful to me, again, I think we ought to be really thoughtful about what we're calling vision and what we're calling strategy, just because I think it's a bit of a trap for the developers if we ask them to build a strategic plan that we're calling a visioning exercise. Again, we don't have to solve that today, but it would I think set us up for an underwhelming feeling, or something that restricts the commission and its leadership beyond a reasonable period. I think one thing that would be helpful for me is a landscape analysis of high performers in the country. Like, are there common areas where folks are knocking it out of the park? Like, who are the top 3 performers in the nation? What can we learn from them? And what lessons have they learned when they've they're likely older organizations. They've likely been around at least a few years longer. There are a few that I can think of around the country. I would leave to the team to determine which ones are worthy of our study. But it does seem like a landscape analysis to know, like, what are the best of the best doing in this space, and what can we learn from that?
Thank you. One, that's something that we are planning to do. And then two, to kind of pick back up on Commissioner Griscom's point, and then to your point about visioning, that's something that we're mindful of, right? We want to kind of get the broad scope and vision, and then take our strategic plan and rework it. As currently written, it will kind of be expired in 2025, but as you all said, even now that we've grown, right, there are some pieces that aren't really applicable because we completed it, or some things that we're striving for that kind of will, still be amorphous. So I definitely think that as we think through visioning, that is something that we can go back and look at. But I appreciate the distinction between the two. I think it's something that we'll have to look at after we kind of get this set. So thank you.
And one last thing, Madam Chair, as I think of, and this is kind of back to on the strategic refresh, or however we want to think about it, because, and this has already been mentioned a couple of times, because so much has happened so fast, we're not a startup anymore. And the organization must evolve based on our new normal, and we know that this new normal is finite in time. We're going to change dramatically again over the course of the next 3 years. And so what the implications of that are organizationally, structurally, the leadership decisions that have to be made. And I would just say, again, I hate to argue semantics. That's not visioning. That's strategy, and that's organizational structure. And so I don't know if we need to just say we're going to do a bit of both simultaneously, but I think they're different, and I would want to make sure that it's timely, relevant, and maybe has a 3 to 5 year life on what the next new normal is. And if we can imagine something that's relevant structurally and everything else for a decade plus, go us. That would be fantastic. But I do think that the two trains should run relatively simultaneously for the modern visioning exercise, and then the modern strategic plan. I think I just doubled your work, and I'm so sorry.
Commissioner Griscom?
I think, Jamie, this adds to your visioning parts, but if not, it fits somewhere. I think I would like, because the part about looking at what others are doing, and are doing it well, I think in my mind, part of that is also those who are self-funding. So that we have figured out, visioning is we're going to be an organization that is self-funded, that is not receiving state dollars, tax dollars. And the second would be, I really would like for us to look at other places where there are both authorizers and those who are running school systems, statewide school systems. We're going to be the only statewide school system. So what does that say? And how do we look at that and make sure that we are looking at it this way rather than looking at it as an individual county might look at it and doing this and that? We've got a much broader vision of trying to set up a school system that's functioning across the state. So I think, Jamie, those maybe fit into where you were, but it's two parts of that more on the visioning side. Thanks.
Eddie Smith?
Well, and to Commissioner Woodson and Tom, what I'm hearing is, so again, it goes back to my noses in, hands out. What we really need to be focusing on is the vision of what we expect. Here, we need to be setting that. How we get there is part of the strategic plan. But one of the things that we can't exclude this time that we didn't have the first time we set this is we've got to bring our existing operators to the table to, here's what we expect, how are you going to get us there? And then, because at the end of the day, what we've got to help set the culture of is self-aware, self-reporting. Our schools need to be self-aware and self-reporting to make sure that we're not catching it. They're letting us know ahead of time when things are working, when they're not, because it's moving the whole our whole portfolio forward. Because at the end of the day, if they're not bought into our vision, do we really want them in our portfolio? High level, 100,000-foot view, we want this, we want this, we want this. Now we leave it up to our staff to work with our operators to set the strategic plan of how we're getting to those goals.
Commissioner Woodson?
Just to build on Eddie's comment, and this is maybe saying it a slightly different way, I'm really interested in what our high-performing operators would say. Like, if we want to be excellent, what would their advice be for us? I mean, so it's not only them, I think it's yes, we're all on the same page in terms of vision. I also think that they could inform us in the process. And so, as we would with any constituency, I assume we're going to be talking with leadership, staff, our leaders of our operators, that kind of thing. But I think getting their, having them inform our decision-making in the visioning or strategic process or both feels very helpful to us as we think about how we're our highest best self.
Commissioner Tudor?
Just comment and then a question. First, thank you for your excellent work and that of your team. I think this is critical. And to your point, Commissioner Woodson, and then I think Commissioner Levine, my question, it's really for my edification because I actually don't think I've ever gone through this process with any organization I've been part of, at least not in great detail. Are we thinking that the product, the ultimate goal for this work is going to be sort of a vision statement that has sort of our broad, high-minded goals and principles, or are we anticipating and mindful of the differentiation between vision and strategy, which I think is very important? Are we going to include objective goals that we can evaluate, whatever that horizon is? I guess that's my ultimate question. Included in this, are there thresholds, objective goals, whatever you want to call it, that we can constantly be looking at and returning to and saying, okay, this is what we need to meet and when, or is that more part of strategy? That may be a dumb question. I apologize, but.
Going through these, and Chair Richards, I know you've been through this quite a bit. You've got to set your vision and let your strategy map onto your vision. Otherwise, you're constantly chasing your tail. So us setting the vision of what we want, what we expect, then letting everyone else map onto that. While yes, we do need to have some input of what would make high-quality charters, I also want to make sure that, because some schools might say, well, this would be the high level. Reading proficiency, for instance, at one school has historically been 20%. We want to get it to 60. Well, that's still an F in my book. I want us to, how do we get to the 80 to 85%? That's where I think the difference might come in. So it's us setting that bigger vision and having the strategy map onto that vision so that we're moving forward.
Two thoughts. One is, and piggybacking off what Commissioner Woodson said, listening to the voice of the client, the customer, is important. So when we talk about, again, the schools within our portfolio, I think getting their opinions about visioning. And maybe we might do that key legislative leadership. But Tom, I want to look at going back to what you brought up. And I think that this is kind of a legislative, again, position or, again, priority, this issue of us being able to stand alone on our own financially. I get that. I really do. I'm not opposed to that. My piece is, from a practical standpoint, are we going to be in a position to do that with the challenges that we face with declining enrollment, okay, competition, really our ability to predict the future in terms of, again, how large our portfolio is going to be, because at the end of the day, it's about dollars. What they can afford to look at paying us in fees, what they can look at impacting their bottom line. So again, I am not opposed to what you're saying, because I think I'm sensitive. You've got that experience and background, and having had those conversations with key legislators who are supporters of us. So I think we probably, again, want to look at figure out and find out what their thoughts are, process. Because I think it's a priority, and I get it, this issue of standing alone financially. My piece is to test, really, is that going to be a practical matter in the next series of years to really be able to achieve that from a performance standpoint? If that performer says we can do that, cool. But if it doesn't really say that in a realistic manner, where are we going to get our cash?
The reason I brought it up is because I think also for the schools we have, they need to understand that, you know, we know this is out there, but we may not be able to get there, to your point. But it needs to be part of what we're talking about and thinking about, so that there's not this notion of at some point fees are going down, away, or whatever. So part of it, Michael, to your, is a much larger discussion for us to say, we might project the vision we'd like to get here, but in doing that, I think we need to make sure, to the things you've brought up, there are some potential hurdles in here that it might be where we'd like to get to, but we've got to make sure that out there, when people look at us and as an organization, this is where we may end up, and so don't sit here as a vision that by year such and such we will be totally freestanding. But we've at least thought about it, and that was the reason I think that's why I brought it up.
Oh, no problem. So first, I absolutely agree with my colleague, Commissioner Woodson. I think I would echo your perspective on visioning and strategy, and certainly all of the comments. So if someone was taking notes, you can put Commissioner Patterson right next to Commissioner Woodson, every word you said there. I think I've got two thoughts, or maybe two sets of thoughts. The first is I just want to volunteer my support in terms of looking at exemplars across the country in the context of visioning, whether that means we visit other jurisdictions to make sure that we really look under the hood and what they're doing. So want to certainly volunteer myself and my time for that. I think the second is along the lines of Commissioner Carter in terms of what the words say on the vision. And I took some notes and just making sure that we continue to serve and support a diverse set of students that need us the most. And I will continue to come to this work supporting and championing my grand division, and knowing that Memphis and Shelby County has a different type of context than other parts of the state. And so whatever that vision is, making sure that it is certainly sympathetic to all students, and we don't. And it is going to be an incredibly hard thing to do because we're not a LEA that is based on one geography. But I do think that is an important aspect of the work. And then in terms of the strategic side of things, Commissioner Smith, I really appreciate, and I can't remember what your third note was in terms of the 3 jobs that TEST does, but thinking about from a strategic standpoint, what are those 2 or 3 sections of the work that we need to focus on as we grow and expand? And then lastly, for me, it's really important that we keep the intersection of sustainability with accountability in terms of the work that we do as an organization.
I ask that Regine include the slide on vision, strategy, tactics, because I do believe that's the framework that you have to undertake visioning work under. Commissioner Patterson's comments were a perfect example of what was the source of what are the things that we will not compromise on as an agency. And I asked for that and what we need to think about. That's a parameter that we're not going to give on. I don't care, it goes across the whole state. And that's, in order to do good vision work, you have to have your parameters right. And we offered some up as suggestions, and I know Lauren talked about it a lot. That is a perfect example of one right there that that needs to be on our list. And I would just encourage folks, as you think about this, look at what was on the paper here, but more importantly, what's in your heart as to the things that should be our key parameters for our visioning work. These are things we're not going to compromise on, and it's accountability and sustainability are going to have a piece of it. What you said, Commissioner Carter, going to have a piece of it. If we can get those parameters down and agreed, then the visioning work becomes easier. You cannot limit your visioning work to the things you know you're going to be able to achieve. your reach has always got to exceed your grasp. So yes, when you come up with the vision, there are going to be things that we'll have in there that we probably won't ultimately be able to do because some of it because things change outside our control, some of it because, we just bit off more than is what's possible in the world we live in. But we need to try to keep the vision work at what is going to be our goal. And the timeline is I think, sort of the thing I want to try to get the sense of where folks are. I usually worked 10 to 15 years ahead of where the company was. And that worked for for FedEx, for the company, because our lead times on getting stuff done were so long. You have to order airplanes and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what is a real time horizon for the vision here. I can tell you, I think we're pretty much agreed that the strategy is probably a 3 to 4 year time period, because that seems to be what's working. I don't know what should be the right time for this visioning and really would like folks' input on that. Yeah, Jamie?
I apologize. One, I don't have the answer on the exact time frame, but I will be thinking about it in the interim. I don't want to miss the chance to echo Commissioner Patterson's comments on the non-negotiables. I would add to the list excellence. We've spent a lot of time and we've made some really tough decisions, some of the hardest decisions in my career. And I'm senior. I've been around a minute. And so we've established an expectation that this isn't just about more schools. It's about more great schools that meet the need of a really important population of Tennessee children. And so I want to answer the question that you actually started with that I haven't participated in so far. I've been quibbling over vision versus strategy. And so I might add quality and excellence in that list of non-negotiables with Terrence's.
Yeah, we're throwing this out for conversation because we're all here together today, and that's what we're getting where I was hoping we would get, was input from the commissioners on what are the parameters, the non-negotiables that are going to govern the visioning work and obviously the flow down to the strategy as well. Because once you get those done, then figuring out what we actually want to say, I mean, you've got a very good start on it, Commissioner Carter, but it's got to be in the context of these are the things that we're doing this based on. And, I think as you and Lauren, you can kind of gather all this up and think about it and continue to provide input.
Well, and on that, looking for some advice here, I mean, a traditional district can have workshops where there's no votes taken, but where they can really, I guess my question is we're already meeting in July. Is there a way that we could add a half day, like where our normal meetings would start at 1, we maybe come in earlier and spend a half day just workshopping all of this out in a room where we can put sticky notes up to really start laying things out. Again, I'm a visual person, so I have to write things down. But then as you see it, you can start to put things into the right buckets, where we kind of have that workshop that is going to inform this a little bit more. Then we've got that framework to go back to our consumers to start getting their input. Because again, once we have the vision, strategy will map onto that vision. We've got to have that vision very clearly. So that's my suggestion, right? This, just listening to everybody, is maybe a half-day work session at our July meeting where we can kind of put all this.
I think that's an excellent idea. And I would go, again, I'm always going outside the sandbox a little bit, but it might not be a bad idea to invite some of the institutions that we regulate to participate in the conversation. Because having them part of it creates a lot of buy-in. Particularly if we decide we want to put some real standards in place, it gives them the ability to be a part of that conversation.
Those are our customers.
Yeah.
That's we want to hear the voice of our customers. And again, I'm even saying we might even consider legislators. Excuse me, Commissioner. I think that's important. Okay? And so I like the suggestion.
I agree with what you just said. I mean, 100% right. Okay.
Well, we're willing to do that, I think it's a great idea. And, it gives us a chance to think about it. Just happy.
So, well, on your second bullet, I think 5 years usually falls into when people think about a strategic plan. 3 to 5. So I think it's more than 5. And I think once you get past 10 years, you're throwing spitwads against the wall. So I would tend to think that it's probably something that's a decade that you're looking at from a vision standpoint. But just to give you some feedback, maybe a little bit longer, but not, I mean, I've had people who said, well, let's do 20 years. I don't think anybody can sit here and project 20 years. But I think 10 years, at least 10 years, 10 to 12, something like that. I know it. Thank you. No, we're doing this now, Michael, so these people have to deal with it, see, but we're gone.
Finally got it
So,
figured out.
without addressing ages, because I feel like we're going into a massive trap of all of us young people are about to get in all kinds of trouble. You know, what I like about 10, so I want to challenge us, let's do 12. And here's why I say 12. That is the typical life cycle of a kid through the school system. What would we want if a kid starting now and when they graduate high school, what would we want to see? So let's think about it from that standpoint of putting ourselves into a 12-year, what do we want our schools to look like 12 years from now so that every student who is graduating, this is what we would like to see them have achieved.
I'm missing something. I really am. That's a long time too. I think this should be 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And we're talking about still, the conversation is about visioning and what we want to try to achieve in 2 to 3 years. Excuse me, and what we want to try to achieve. My recommendation and my thoughts are, God, let's get on with it. It needs to be within 2 years to 3 years, and that's what we want to achieve. It's going to take time to ramp up anyway. But I do think that that's, again, the mantra that we, in fact, need to, we're woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning, talking points, elevator speech, this is what our vision is, and it needs to happen now.
Yeah, and that's why I say the bottom of this is the tactics. Because the tactics are the things you do, starting immediately.
Yeah.
To get you both to the strategic plan and to effectuate your long-term vision. And so, yeah, obviously, that's got to be.
That's process, Madam Chair, that's process. You got that. Vision's concept. This is how, again, what we want to look at during the future. I'm not wanting to wait 10 years before this comes to fruition. This needs to like happen now, and you know, relatively soon.
Well, I think you're saying the same thing, pardon me, but I think you're saying the same thing. By the way, can we have meetings where we actually can look at each other?
This is why we don't use this room, because it's an awful.
I think you're actually saying the same thing. The vision really is what Eddie's talking about. Kids that are going through the system, what do we want the outcome to be in 12 years? But what you're talking about is, if that's the goal, what needs to happen now to tee those kids up? And so we're actually all saying the same thing. I think getting the formal approach is vision, goals, strategy, tactics. I mean, we get all that. But there are things that have to happen near term. And frankly, I agree with what Mike's saying is that every day that goes by that we don't do it in the near term, there are kids who are being affected.
With all due respect, Commissioner, no, we're not saying the same thing. I'm talking about, I think, half of what you said I agree with, but that issue of achieving that vision, I'm saying 2 years, not 12 years. That's where that's what I think is where the disconnect is. I don't want to look at, in fact, this vision being accomplished in 12 years, or 10 years, or 5 years. I'd like to see aggressively 2 years or 3 years. 3 years is a max.
I disagree.
You hear me?
I do, and I disagree. I think we are saying the same thing. But let me be more. But let me clarify.
Disagree agreeably.
Let me clarify a little bit more. What Eddie's saying is, for a child, if a child's entering the system at the beginning of the process, there are things that have to happen for that child to get on that trajectory. For a child that's in the 10th grade, there's not a lot of time, and so the goal is for our program, for the charter schools in our state, whether you enter in the 1st grade or in the 10th grade, we want the outcome by the time they graduate, that they're graduating college or career ready, or on their way to whatever their dream is. There's different entry points, and to your point, the things that have to happen right away for the kid entering the first grade, we've got to work on that. But it may be a different strategy for a kid that's entering in the secondary school setting. I think it's not 12 years out. It's what do we want the experience to be for the child who graduates from our programs, right? I mean, that.
And for instance, and I'm going to throw this out as an example, it's not hard and fast and set in stone, but if we said, big vision, that we want to see every school in our portfolio that students are at 85% reading proficiency in 12 years, doesn't mean we can't start working towards getting them there, but the likelihood of taking a 4th or 5th grader or even a 10th grader and getting them to 85% in 2 years is extremely unlikely. But we can move that over time. Or the vision may be, we always want to, but a sub-point of that may be, all right, so in the interim, how do we ensure that all of our schools are exceeding the current reading proficiency by 3 to 5% to get us to that objective? So while the big goal may be 85% reading proficiency, in the interim, how are we setting things up so that we're exceeding the current goals so that all of our schools are staying at or above? Because again, what we set as that overall vision will go to what Tom has brought up. If we're high performing, we are the place that people want to be. We're not going to be losing students to private schools because students want to be in our portfolio because we've got high performing schools. So
I've been on this commission with you for 4 years now. This is the most lively conversation we've had. It underscores why we need to be doing this, what Eddie's ideas, and half they may not be enough, and maybe we may need to do more than one of those. But these are things we have to argue through because we've been under a crunch from the beginning just to get everything stood up and get our and fulfill our statutory responsibilities. Now we're getting into how do we push performance, and that's a really important conversation. Because I actually agree. I think all of us want the same thing, which is every kid that's in one of our schools has a successful tenure, and whatever their dream or ambition is, we help them get there. And there's a lot of different tactics that have to be deployed.
Well, and I don't think we're not going to solve it today. It's something that's a legal plan and a half-day additional day in starting Chattanooga, so everybody don't want to put that on the calendar.
That just means we have more time for Chattanooga with Commissioner Griscom. So, but I think what I'm hearing is everyone should probably plan to arrive Wednesday evening so that we'll have our Thursday morning session be this. Yeah.
See, I tend to agree with you. One of my biggest frustrations with this whole body of work is that people never seem to get any better. You know, I mean, they say, oh, well, we're going to do this and they'll be 5% better and then they'll be 5% better and they'll be 5%. Well, no. The vision is every child can read and do work and be successful the way Alan's been saying it. And it's not good enough to say we're going to wait, a long time to get that done. So I think we've got a lot to talk about. I do think, if we can get sort of agreed on what are the things we won't compromise on and what are our outcomes, we could work on that so we would come into July with those things coming as a straw man. We may agree with them, we may not. I'm not as hung up on the time frame. I'm just trying to have the conversation, and then we can go from there on how we move forward. But I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying, Mr. Carter, because I agree. There's saying we're going to do it in 10 years isn't going to do it. And as I've seen these things work, because it takes a while to build stuff out, you do different things to achieve the near-term result that you've got to have for the 10th grade kid. And then you do different things with the middle school to get the middle school kids. And then, all right, if we get it to start in elementary school, how are we going to do that? And maybe by having that kind of conversation.
And that's being practical and realistic.
So, Chair, I think what would be good is if Lauren, Commissioner Smith, with Tess, could kind of get out what we believe would be our non-negotiables. Because then one of the things that I think would be good when we meet is, again, going back to not knowing yet, and I'm not trying to say we've got any structure, but if we're starting to look at, okay, we've really got the LEA function, and then we've got the authorizer appellate function at that July workshop, we really need to start going through a lot of these things and figuring out which bucket those truly live in. Because from that, strategy and then different consumer, I mean, honestly, like when we talk about consumers, one of the things that, and we haven't talked about it, we've got a good relationship with Metro, with Shelby County. From the authorizer, that side, what would be helpful to them? What would be helpful to our district partners that we maybe need to do versus on the LEA side, listening to our schools and the strategies and things around what would help them move forward with student success. So I think there's even within that, there's multiple consumers that we've got to think about, but getting everything into the right bucket first would help us. And then it really helps, I'm looking at Tess, for Tess to be able to come back with, here's what that structure could look like for us to then start putting that vision around, the strategy around when would we need to hire some of those staff? What would we need to go to legislators and start pitching, for that, additional staff and positions we may need. So that's where my mind is right this second. But again, I think we've got to go back to what are our non-negotiables that we're not going to bend on.
What do we think is that?
And in, I think I got it all. I really appreciate that feedback. It's really great to kind of see you all talk together. I'll love to go back to my facilitator days to help facilitate a workshop. And then I think just visioning exercise, we can kind of talk through that. And then to your point, Commissioner Carter, strategy, tactic, what do we have to do? I'll plan to take this feedback, talk to Tess, talk to Lauren, and then before July, I'll be sending you all pre-work so that way we can go, get in. We'll have some parameters for our non-negotiables and then really have that discussion. I think once we all sit down, I think we'll be able to, once we have some time carved out to talk through the vision work, we should, be able to get it done. But really just want to say thank you all for this. I really appreciate it. This gets me really excited. And you said sticky notes, and I'm like, yep, I can do that. So really excited to do that. No, same. Yeah. I think that'd be helpful. So to wrap up. Yeah.
June of this year.
So I'll take the feedback today.
Be around.
And I'll bring that back to you all. I do plan to include stuff from other states, and we'll also include a risk analysis. So just want to say thank you all again for engaging in this conversation with me. Thank you.
All right. Well, I've got second, motion to adjourn second, and I've got to finish this official.